Alpine is a brand that started about 70 years ago in 1955, but it was reborn in 2017 with the car that so many of us really enjoy talking about, the A110. The A110 has come out and everybody's enjoyed that lightweight, frolicking, simple feeling. This is the next car in Alpine's range. It's called the A290 because it says so right next to my feet. But what makes this really special is this is an Alpine hot hatch, and specifically an electric one, because it's based on the Renault 5, the car that so many of you enjoyed watching in an earlier video. I'm Jonny Smith, this is the Late Break Show, and we're going to have a really detailed first look at the production finished A290. This episode is proudly supported by driverreviews.com, Europe's largest verified independent tyre reviews platform. So there has been a Renault 5 Alpine before, back in the late 70s, 1977, but in the UK, we never got it called the Alpine because Alpine was already a name owned by the Roots Group, Chrysler, Talbot. So they had to rename it the Renault 5 Gordini, the Gordini Turbo and the non-turbo. This then is a hot hatch. It's the reborn idea of the hot Renault, if you like, but without calling it Renault Sport, it's now going with the Alpine name. The reason being, Alpine have competed in rally back in the 70s and won in 73. They've competed in Le Mans and won in the late 70s, and they're now in Formula One. So this backs up their kind of racing pedigree. Design-wise, right. If you haven't watched my Renault 5, my new R5 walk-around video, I strongly suggest you look at that before this video because it covers most of the bases about the underpinnings of this car, which it shares with the Renault 5. But it doesn't share as much as you think. Looks. The first thing that you look at is the face. And if you think about the A110 Alpine, it has four really distinguished headlights. I think it almost looks like a kind of a frog or a toad in a good way. And the old Alpines always had four distinctive circular headlights or lozenge headlights. This is the same. These are really cool. They look like add-on spots, rally lights, and that's the idea. They're called the Monte Carlo lamp. An Alpine design team said they put that X on there to make it look like tape on a rally light. And so these are signature Alpine units. This is still a Renault 5 light cluster, I think, with that added X in the middle. I think it looks excellent. And then you've got the Alpine badge there, right across there with this bonnet with little notches in. And then down here, you've got some snowflake-inspired grille behind which the air will come and go and be controlled by HVAC and the cooling system for that battery pack which lives between the axles. Now, why is it snowflake themed? Well, Alpine. The whole reason why the company was called Alpine is because of racing cars up and down Alpine roads and that agile nippiness. That's why it was called Alpine. And you'll see more snowflake designs throughout this little walk around. It's really busy here today. This is one of the first looks at this car. We're in Paris, we're in a weird warehouse, and it's quite echoey and it's busy. You'll see that. Have a look round now. Look. Yeah. Lots of little workshops explaining all the tech and all the thinking behind this. But just like the R5, which really impressed me and a lot of other people, this is one of those electric cars which is capturing the attention of people who have resisted EVs, I think. A little bit of information. The track is wider on the Alpine A290. It's 60 mil wider than the R5, which is what, 3 centimetres either side. And that is done in several different ways. It's because mostly under there, it doesn't have the same motor as the R5. It actually has the motor out of the Renault Megane E-Tech and the Scenic E-Tech, the latter of which just won Car of the Year. So it has more power, a physically bigger motor than the normal R5. How much power? Well, you can order this car in several different flavours, which we'll talk a bit more later, but entry level is 180 horsepower, and then it goes up to 220 horsepower with 300 Newton meters of torque. So that's pretty cool. And the battery pack which it's mated to is the 52 kilowatt hour battery pack. The Renault 5, the R5 will be available with 2 packs. This one's just the larger one because Alpine says it needs it. But it's not heavy. This is about 1,450 kilos. 1,450 kilos is not a lot for A, an electric car, and B, a modern car, frankly. So this comes in significantly lighter than most of the cars it rivals, at the top of that list being the Mini. 6.4 seconds to 62, I'll have you know. This is a detail on the Renault 5, the R5, which is sort of charging status light bars. According to Alpine, this is just a piece of jewellery with sort of typography, triangles, looks like a mountain range from above. And again, it's this whole Alpine thing, of which there's quite a few graphical elements inside. Body kit. Go round there. I'll meet you round there. Right, so like I said, wider track, so extra arches. This has aluminium knuckles, okay, and it's got different anti-roll bars, and it's also got hydraulic bump stops taken from the A110. Brakes taken from the A110, its big brother. These are Brembos. I can't remember what they are. I think they're 320 mil. Let me just look. Hang on. Yeah, they are 320 mil, and the back ones are 288 mil. So Brembo monoblocks right there. Wheels. These are like a snowflake design. Now they're murdered out. I'll talk a bit more about the wheels in a minute because there's different derivatives of this, which other ones I prefer. And the tyres on this car are really crucial. So I'll talk about those in a second. Let's move down here because you've got these pronounced black side skirts here, which really do flare out nicely. And then you've got the crease here in the bodywork, which comes around and goes back to the front. What does that remind you of? The 80s Renault 5 Turbo, or AKA the Turbo 2, the mid-engined hot hatch mad thing that Renault created. That's where the air intakes were. It's very similar, and that's what it's been inspired by. But of course, the A290, like the R5, is 5-seat, 5-door only. So that that indentation there, which I just talked about, this haunch here is a little bit more pronounced than the normal R5. It's great. It's a really good looking car, especially from right back there where you are. Same light clusters as the R5, they're all open. I thought they'd be enclosed. And at the back here, the R5's got a completely flat tailgate, which is just like the 80s version. But Alpine, they said two things. One, aero's important for efficiency on EVs, so they didn't want to go crazy with a bigger spoiler up here. So they've put a little ducktail midway down the tailgate here. And then lower down, this bumper is Alpine specific. It's got a diffuser unit down there. Of course, it's a skateboard platform car, so totally flat floor car. And these body colored little lines, there's body color there, and then up here, in this instance, it's body color around here, but you can actually option this as polished aluminium and something else, as well as the flag on the C-pillar, which I think is also optional. Talking of which, if you think that this blue really pops, of course Alpine's blue is their color. This is a new blue because this is part of their new generation, because the A110 is about to be replaced with a new A110, and then there'll be another Alpine. So they're not a car who launch every year. And that's what makes this even more interesting, just to see what they're going to do next. So yeah, you've got this updated, extra vivid Alpine blue, which they're replacing with the older blue. They look really similar, but this one apparently pops more in natural light when you're not in a dingy car park. There's not that many colours to choose from these cars. You've got a sort of like a pearlescent white, you've got a black, you've got a matte grey. All of them have a gloss body kit. So when you order it in matte grey, it looks quite cool with the gloss body kit. And I've just noticed on the top of this arch, there's another little peak, a little triangle. Again, a reference to mountain terrain, where the Alpine brand was born. There's that shark fin on the back as well. And of course, it's two-tone up here, which I think is, again, optional. You don't have to have it two-tone if you don't want to. So yeah, they've made it sportier than the R5, but I think the R5 looks surprisingly sporty anyway. It's just a little bit more muscular without being sinister. So many new cars in the last 15 years have looked so angry and aggressive. This does not look aggressive to me. Oh, little nugget of information. That capital A with the arrow is facing, the A is leaning the other way compared to what it normally does. But that's because, according to Alpine, because it's on this wing, the arrow always has to face forwards. So the previous A110, the current A110, doesn't have that. Is that interesting to anybody? Or is it just me? Remember what I said about the different tyre and wheel combos on this car? Well, the Alpine A290 have worked directly with Michelin to create 3 different versions of tyre that you can buy. They're all 225 40 19s. You can't get any other diameter size. And these are Michelin Pilot Sport S5s. So they're the ones that are really grip specific because they're very hot hatchy. But if you want the best compromise between performance and range, because obviously for an EV tyre you want low rolling resistance and good economy, you have this one which is called the Pilot Sport EV, that's specific to that. So that's probably the best overall tyre. But of course, if you live in a place where you get cold temperatures, stuff like that, you have this one. You've got the Michelin Pilot Alpine for the Alpine. So you have all these different options. This car here, the one at the back, this is all black, so you can see the black body kit kind of blends in. This has the different alloy wheel designs. So as I've just shown you on this line of wheels, there's 2 styles of alloys, but they're finished in different ways. So this has got the square in the middle, whereas the snowflake on the blue car I've just been looking around is completely different. But you can option them with different diamond cut faces, either jet black, slightly diamond cut, or fully diamond cut. I'll explain easier by just pointing over there because they're all where I've just stood there. But when it comes to needing tyres for your car, head to driverreviews.com because you can put your registration number in and search for the best tyres for your car, for your budget, but you'll also get real testimonials from real customers who have purchased certain tyres and given feedback on what they think of them with a rating. Head there now. We haven't got much time with this car, so I have to rattle around it to give you hopefully the most information that we know. Now, boot space, it's exactly the same as the R5, and the R5 is best in class. It's got a phenomenally big boot, this car, for its wheelbase and size. That is 326 litres, and I'll put on the screen now the boot sizes of its rivals, like I did in the R5 walk round. It's way bigger than most of them. In fact, it positively pisses on most of them. Yeah, it does, I said it. So that's the great thing about this car. It promises practicality as well as the suspension and the handling, which in so many of the workshops talking to the engineers, they've said this car has to be really playful. They've used the word playful, comfortable, compliant. And those are things which if you've ever been in an Alpine A110, it does all these things so well, mostly because it doesn't weigh much. So you don't have to like stiffen it up so much. And of course for an EV, this is not that heavy. The interior is different. Let's have a look at the differences compared to the R5. Forgot to say, this car is entirely built in France. I mean, just like the R5, they said. The car's built in Douai, the motor is built in France at a mega factory in Cléon, and the battery is also going to be built in France as of the summer 2025, so next summer. Pretty impressive, really, keeping it very, very patriotic. Now, interior. Before I sit in, you'll see the seats are really kind of flat in the middle, reshaped, and they've got very, very pronounced bolsters here and here, like, I think, the old Renault 5 Turbo. There are 3 different types of fabric and leather combos. There's Nappa leather on the steering wheel here, and there's some Nappa leather on here. This is the launch edition, which is limited to 1,955 units because Alpine was born in 1955. So they're more expensive and they're a little bit more elaborate here. Entry-level fabric is recycled plastic, and I actually think it's probably my favourite, which is the case. And also, I would say, most launch editions tend to be a bit cheesy. Sitting in, now this is cool, because if you've watched my R5 video, you'll note that the gear selector is a column shift, and it's modelled on like a Chanel lipstick dispenser up here. The Alpine A290 does not have that. It borrows the A110's little cluster here, and this actually, probably this whole thing from memory. There's a few kind of like triangles on top of here. So yeah, neutral drive, reverse. So because it's an EV, there's no gears. But what you do have, you have a totally remodeled steering wheel. And because Alpine's in Formula One, it's borrowed that kind of inspiration from F1 in these knobs here. This lovely, really nicely machined blue aluminium knob, that is one of 5 stages of regen braking. You can have no regen as well if you want. Up here, the red one, and you might see the back of it, it's sort of been hollowed out really neatly, lots of detail. That is your over boost, that's your overtaking boost button. You have to hold your finger on it apparently, and it acts like a big kick down. So you don't have to change your throttle position, you just hold it and it will give you full beans. And then you can let it off whenever you want to let it off. And then that's your drive mode button. And it'll have eco, sport, what does it have? Normal, sport, personal, save, yeah. So all the usual things. That is wireless phone charging. Those are actual physical buttons, the same as the R5, which is really pleasing. And then these 2 screens here, one's angled towards the driver, one's directly in front of the driver. They're both a smidge over 10 inches from memory. The infotainment is all Google, which thank the Lord is fantastic. And that includes things like allowing you to put in your destination, telling you where all the chargers are, but also preheating the battery pack en route to a charger. So it means it speeds up the rapid charging process. Forgot to also say that the shape of the steering wheel, the profile of the steering wheel is different. In F1 inspired, it's got a flat bottom, it's got flat kind of thumb indentations here, and a slightly flatter top with a motorsport line. Top spec Alpine A290s have got the DeVille, I think you call it the DeVille, 9-speaker, 600 watt sound system, which I've had a demonstration of, and it sounds absolutely phenomenal. So the attention to detail here has really been stepped up because this is a premium brand. But it's worth mentioning also that the different models of the A290, the GTS is the one which has got both luxury and performance, so all 220 horsepower and all of the luxuries and the leather. Then you've got the GT Premium, which is 180 horsepower with the premium luxury. Then you've got GT Performance, which is all the power but less of the luxury. And then you've got just the GT, which is less power, less luxury. Pricing, they haven't confirmed it properly, and they will confirm it probably before this video goes out, in which case I'll put it on the screen. But murmurs are 38,000 euros starting price, which from memory, that makes this about 13,000 pounds more than the Renault 5. Bear that in mind, because the 5 is phenomenal. And talking of like fun and buttons, it has a physical traction control off button. So when you want to physically have lots of unhinged fun, you can. You just press it. Alpine haven't ruled out the fact that there will be an all-wheel drive, so twin motor version of this coming. Why? Because that would explain that independent suspension rear end. That's actually quite a complex thing for a car of this segment. This particular Alpine version has got alloy subframes for the engine, and there's aluminium components at the suspension at the back there. So, and there's different bushings, because this is the thing. If you've ever driven a Renault sport car, you know that this is going to handle well. You know the suspension is just going to be so good, because it's one of the things that Renault Sport was so good at. And of course the Alpine A110, the current one, is just when it comes to that sort of thing. Anyway, let's talk about charging. There is no official range figures given to us yet, but probably by the time you're watching this video, Alpine will have released something, in which case I'll put it on the screen. But 380 kilometre max range is what's been spouted. Remember, the car's got a 52 kilowatt hour battery pack. It can rapid charge CCS up to 110 kilowatts, and it also has an onboard AC charger which charges at 11 kilowatts. So those things will really help in the real world. But of course, because it's a sporty car, it depends how you drive it, doesn't it? Whether or not you're going to get max range. If you want a hypermile, I suggest you don't buy this one, you go for the normal Renault 5. And in terms of hypermiling and stuff like that, compromise, that's where the different combinations of tyres that have been specifically developed for this car by Michelin, that's where they come into play. Interesting proposition, this car, isn't it? Because there's this huge amount of practicality, but playfulness with the suspension that this car's got, with the fact that it will do, what, 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds, but it'll go 100 kilometers to 0 in 3 seconds, so good stopping and handling power as well. Weight distribution, according to Alpine, it's 57% front weight distribution. This motor here, despite being out of the bigger car, the Megane, it's still a lot lighter than a conventional hot hatch engine and gearbox, which bodes really well for that kind of exciting handling that we want. And of course, the battery pack sits really low in this bespoke chassis. So again, that bodes really well. I forgot to mention round there, where that charge flap is, this car has vehicle to grid and vehicle to load ability, which I think Nissan pioneered. And of course, Nissan are in partnership with Renault. That means you can take power out of the car and put an adapter in and run like household appliances or go camping. But also at night, the car, when it's plugged into a charger, can put power back into the grid. So if you're in a country where you can feed it with power, and then it can charge the car again when it's a much cheaper rate of electricity. All very interesting stuff, I think. Now, sounds. Sounds on an EV are divisive. Some people want really quiet, some people want really leery. Abarth, for example, I did a review on the new Abarth. It has a silly sound that's really excessive and it's boring. Then you have things like the Taycan, where it has this futuristic, crazy sound. Alpine have made 2 different sounds for this car, and it's kind of like a mashup of a real 4-cylinder engine that's kind of throttling up, combined with an electric motor whoosh. It's better than I'm describing it. But you can also turn it off if you want to. And just like the Renault 5, they say acoustically, the cabin, they've really made a lot of effort to make sure the cabin is quite a quiet place. It has a mandatory sound under, 20 miles an hour or something for pedestrians, but that's all electric cars. It combines real practicality with playfulness, this car. You know, you've got a massive boot and a 10-metre turning circle, but combined with that Alpine sporty suspension and damping that's been recalibrated, I think this has got a lot going for it, the A290. I'm really excited to know how it actually drives, and as soon as I can get in one, you'll be the first to know about it. My question is this. The Renault 5, the R5, is so good on the face of it. Do I want to pay that much more to get one of these? I love these, for example. I love this design language here, and I love the indentation on the door, but I actually think I prefer the styling of the interior, the Renault 5. I think the Renault 5, the plain one, is better. I say plain, it's not plain, it's really cool. But I'd like to know what you think. And again, if you haven't watched my Renault 5 walk around video, I strongly suggest you watch that one as well. Thank you very much. And if you haven't already subscribed to The Late Break Show, go and have yourself a big fat subscribe and click like and all the other things that algorithms apparently like. Cheers.